Dust swirled across the barren New Mexico territory as the auction wagon creaked to a halt. Under the merciless sun stood 7 Apache children, ropes binding their small wrists. The crowd of settlers and soldiers eyed them like cattle. 6 were claimed quickly strong boys for labor, girls for household service. Only 1 remained, a sickly boy with fever-bright eyes who no one wanted. That's when he appeared at the edge of the gathering, a lone Apache warrior, weathered and gaunt, carrying nothing but a worn medicine pouch. The auctioneer laughed when he stepped forward, asking what a broke Indian could possibly offer. What would drive a proud warrior to surrender his sacred name, his very identity, for a child he never knew? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The warrior stood motionless at the gathering's edge, his weathered face revealing nothing of the storm within. Nako Bear Spirit had once been respected among his people, a name earned in his youth when he'd survived an encounter with a great bear that had left the scars still visible on his chest. Now, at 45 winters, his once powerful frame had grown lean from hunger, his buckskins worn thin from endless wandering. 3 nights ago, as he slept beneath stars near the sacred mountains, a vision had come. Children crying out in a language they'd been forbidden to speak. Small hands reaching through darkness. When he woke, drenched in sweat despite the night's chill, he knew he must follow this path. The medicine pouch at his hip, his only remaining possession of value contained sacred items connecting him to ancestors. Eagle feather, obsidian shard, a bear's tooth, herbs for healing. Its weight against his side reminded him of who he was, even as the white man's world tried to erase him. The auction wagon had passed him on the trail yesterday. He'd hidden among rocks, watching small bound figures huddled beneath canvas. There, fear scent carried to him on the wind. Without conscious thought, he'd altered his course to follow Dot. Now he studied the sickly boy remaining on the auction block. Perhaps 10 summers old, thin as a winter reed, eyes bright with fever. The child swayed slightly, fighting to remain standing despite obvious illness. Something in his quiet dignity stirred Nako's spirit. $5 for the runt, the auctioneer called half-heartedly. Anyone? He might survive with proper care. Could be trained for simple tasks, silence answered him. The crowd had thinned after the healthier children sold. Not worth the feed, muttered a farmer, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. Colonel Harland Webster, the military officer overseeing the auction, consulted his ledger with impatience. His blue uniform remained crisp despite the heat, brass buttons gleaming in harsh sunlight. If there are no reasonable offers, this one can be remanded to the mission school, Webster said, voice clipped. Though I doubt they'll take him in this condition. Nako understood the unspoken meaning. The missions had little use for dying children. This one would be left to fate meaning a lonely death, far from his people. The sickly boy finally met his gaze, something flickering in those fever-bright eyes. Not hope. The child was too young to remember hope, but perhaps recognition of shared blood, of kinship that transcended all else. In that moment, Nako made his decision. He stepped forward from the shadows, causing several nearby settlers to startle at his sudden appearance. What have we here? The auctioneer's eyebrows rose. Come to see your people sold, Chief. Nako ignored the mockery, focusing instead on the boy. What is his name? The question seemed to confuse the auctioneer, who shrugged. Don't rightly. No, they don't come with papers. This prompted chuckles from the remaining crowd. How much? Nako asked, voice low and steady. Open laughter now. The auctioneer made a show of looking him up and down, taking in the worn moccasins, the patched buckskins, the lack of visible weapons or goods. And what would you be paying with, exactly? Feathers? Arrowheads? More laughter. Colonel Webster stepped closer, hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. These children are being rehomed under government authority to proper Christian families. They're being given the opportunity to become civilized. Nako kept his face impassive, though anger burned in his chest. He looked again at the boy, who now watched him with intensity despite his weakness. "I will pay," Nako said simply. "With what?" Webster demanded, irritation clear in his clipped tones. Nako's hand moved to the medicine pouch at his waist. "With something of great value." The auction had begun at noon, beneath a sun that showed no mercy. Colonel Webster had arrived with an official-looking ledger bound in black leather, its pages filled with columns recording each child as though they were livestock. "By order of the Department of Indian Affairs," Webster had announced, reading. From a document bearing official seals, these Apache children, having no suitable guardians following military action against hostile elements, are to be placed with appropriate families for proper Christian upbringing and civilization. The crowd murmured approval. To them, the colonel's words transformed what might otherwise seem troubling into an act of charity. Nako, watching from hiding, had understood the cruel reality. These children were survivors of a raid on a peaceful camp, their parents likely slaughtered or imprisoned. The first child, a boy of perhaps 12 summers, strong despite his circumstances, had gone to a rancher for $20. "Good for cattle work," the man had said, circling the boy like examining. "A horse." The boy's face remained stone still, but his eyes followed the man with the wariness of a trapped animal. Two girls, sisters by their similar features, were separated, despite clinging to each other. One to a shopkeeper's wife, the other to a farmer needing help with younger children. The older had whispered something to the younger before being pulled apart. A promise, perhaps, or a prayer. A woman in a plain gray dress had stepped forward. During the proceedings, "Colonel Webster," she'd called, her voice surprisingly firm. "I must object to separating family members. Surely this violates Christian principles of family sanctity." Webster had barely glanced at her. "Miss Holloway, your concern for these charges is admirable, but misplaced. They adapt quickly at this age. Better they forget their savage past entirely." Sarah Holloway, the schoolteacher from the nearby settlement, had pressed her lips together tightly but said nothing more. Instead, she'd made careful notes in a small book, recording each child's appearance and destination. When only the sickly boy remained, Miss Holloway had approached him, offering a canteen of water, which he'd accepted, with trembling hands. "His name is Taza," she'd told the auctioneer quietly. "I've made it my business to learn what I can of them. His father was a medicine man." The auctioneer had shrugged. "Won't matter much where he's headed." Nahab observed all this, noting those who treated the children with at least minimal kindness versus those seeing only potential labor. The shadows lengthened across the packed earth of the trading post yard as the proceedings continued. Now, with Nako having stepped forward, the remaining onlookers gathered closer, sensing unusual entertainment. The sickly boy Taza swayed slightly, his eyes never leaving the warrior's face. "I'm running a proper auction here, not a charity for savages," the auctioneer said, though his curiosity was evident. "State your offer or stand aside." Colonel Webster stepped closer, hand still resting on his pistol. His eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm curious what you believe you possess that holds value in a civilized market." Nako met his gaze steadily. "I offer my name." Confusion crossed Webster's face. "Your name? You expect payment for words?" An elderly settler at the edge of the crowd muttered. The Indians touched in the head, but Sarah Holloway stepped forward, understanding dawning on her face. "Colonel, among the Apache, a name is sacred, given through vision and ceremony. It connects them to the spirit world and their ancestors. To surrender one's name is ... double quotes." She hesitated, searching for words. "To become nothing," Nako finished, I offer this for the boy." The colonel's expression shifted to one of amused condescension. "You propose to trade something invisible and worthless by any practical standard. Test its worth," Yako challenged. "After I surrender it, I can never again be called by it among my people. I become exiled from my ancestors. Ask your scouts." If this is not true, silence fell over the gathering. Even those who had been laughing moments before sensed something momentous in Nako's offer. Colonel Webster turned to a man at the edge of the crowd, a scout in dusty buckskins, half Apache himself, employed by the army for his tracking skills. "Martinez, what nonsense is this?" The scout shifted uncomfortably. "Not nonsense, Colonel. Apache warriors receive their true names through sacred ceremony, after vision quests or great deeds. The name carries power, connects them to the spirit world. 2. Surrender it." He hesitated, glancing at Nako with reluctant respect. "It is like dying while still breathing." Webster's face registered surprise before settling back into skepticism. "Superstitious claptrap. To you, perhaps," Sarah Holloway interjected, "but not to them. If this man offers his name, he's offering everything that makes him who he is among his people." Nako stood impassive, but his mind traveled back 25 winters to the night he earned his name. 3 days alone on the mountain, fasting, praying, seeking vision. The massive bear that had emerged from shadows, standing upright like a man. Their battle, leaving him near death. How the bear had suddenly stopped its attack, looked into. His eyes with ancient wisdom, then turned away, granting life rather than taking it. When the elders found him, barely alive, they had listened to his feverish account. The medicine man had declared his name, Nako, bear spirit marking him as one who had communed with the powerful bear medicine, one who would carry the strength and healing knowledge of that spirit. For 25 years, that name had defined him, earned him respect in council, brought him to the center of tribal ceremonies. Until the sickness came to their camp 2 winters ago. Until his wife and son had died despite his desperate prayers. Until his grief had driven him into solitude and wandering, his failure to save them diminishing his standing among the people. Yet even in his lowest moments, he had been Nako. That connection remained, a thread linking him to ancestors, to purpose. "You ask what this is worth?" Nako spoke directly to Webster now. "Ask your scout what happens to one with no name among the Apache." Martinez looked away, uncomfortable. "He becomes ghost-walking, neither living nor dead. No one speaks to him. No place in ceremonies or council. No one will share food or fire." The scout made a subtle warding gesture. Bad medicine to even look upon such a one. Taza coughed violently, breaking the tension. The boy's legs buckled, and he would have fallen if Sarah hadn't stepped quickly to steady him. "He needs care immediately," she said, her voice tight with concern. "This fever isn't breaking." "Then it's settled," the auctioneer said with forced cheerfulness, uncomfortable with the heaviness that had descended. "No one wants a dying Indian boy, and this one offers something ... for him." He looked to Webster for the final decision. The colonel fingered the silver badge on his uniform, symbol of his authority. For a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes as he regarded Nako. "You would become nothing to your people. For a child not of your blood? A child who may die despite your sacrifice?" "I would," Nako said simply. Webster shook his head, bemused. "Very well. A worthless trade for damaged goods seems fitting enough." He gestured to the clerk. "Record that the last child was remanded to. What shall we call you now?" "I have no name," Nako replied. "After today, I never had one. Poetic," Webster said dryly, "but impractical for paperwork." "Martinez, what do Apache call such men?" The scout hesitated before answering reluctantly. "Shidi." "The one who is not." "Shidi it is, then?" Webster nodded to the clerk. who scratched the unfamiliar word into the ledger with a grimace. The warrior once called. Nako reached for the ceremonial knife kept in his medicine pouch. Its handle was wrapped in rawhide, worn smooth from years, of use in sacred rituals. The small blade caught the late afternoon sun as he held it up for all to see. "Among my people, words alone do not make ceremony," he explained, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "The spirits must witness, through actions." He grasped a lock of his long black hair, streaked with gray, and with one swift motion cut it free. The severed strands fell into his palm, physical manifestation of identity sacrificed. "I release the name given to me after my bear vision," he said in Apache language, then repeated in English for the onlookers. "I surrender my place in council, my voice in ceremony, my right to be remembered in songs. From this moment, I walk as shadow among my people." He placed the lock of hair and knife on the ground before Colonel Webster, then removed his medicine pouch and ceremonially emptied its contents beside them. Eagle feather, bear tooth, sacred herbs, and stones collected from significant places in his life. "The physical elements of my medicine remain on this earth," he continued, the ritual words coming from deep memory. "The spiritual power returns to the ancestors who granted it." Webster watched with unexpected solemnity. Even this man, who dismissed native ways as superstition, could not help but feel the weight of what transpired. Behind his official demeanor, something human responded to the dignity of the sacrifice. The warrior gathered the items from the ground and carefully replaced them in the medicine pouch, all except the lock of hair, which he left in the dust. The pouch would continue to hold sacred objects, but without the spiritual connection that had made them extensions of his identity. "It is done," he said simply. Webster nodded to the auctioneer. "Release the boy to him." The auctioneer untied the rope binding Taza's wrists, giving the child a gentle push toward the nameless warrior. The boy stumbled forward weakly, eyes wide with uncertainty. "What happens when he dies on you?" Someone called from the crowd. "Gave up your soul for?" "Nothing." The warrior didn't respond, focusing instead on the child who now stood before him. Taza's skin burned with fever, his thin frame trembling with each breath. "You belong to no one," the warrior told him softly in Apache, "least of all to me. But I will protect you while I have strength." The boy's response surprised him. "You had a vision of the bear?" Taza whispered in halting Apache, revealing he had understood at least part of the ceremony. "I did," the warrior confirmed, surprised. "My father spoke of such visions before they killed him." The words were simple, devoid of emotion, not from lack of feeling, but from too much of it. Sarah Holloway approached, carrying a small bundle. "Medicine," she explained, offering it to the warrior. "Willow bark for his fever, bread, and dried meat. It isn't much." "Why help us?" the warrior asked. Sarah glanced at Colonel Webster, who was already turning away, interest fading now that the unusual spectacle had concluded. "Because what's happening here is wrong," she said quietly, "and I've done too little to stop it." The warrior accepted her offering with a respectful nod, then carefully wrapped his blanket around Taza's shoulders. The boy swayed on his feet, clearly struggling to remain conscious. "You need to leave quickly," Sarah advised. Webster's generosity may not last once he considers how this might appear in reports to his superiors. The warrior lifted Taza into his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, bones light as a bird's beneath thin skin. "Which way do you go?" Sarah asked. The warrior looked to the distant mountains rising purple against the sunset. "Away from your people, into the old places." As they departed, he felt the stares of settlers following them, some hostile, some merely curious, a few perhaps troubled by what they had witnessed. Behind them, the auction wagon was already being prepared for the journey to the next settlement. The ledger closed on today's transactions. They traveled until darkness made the rocky path treacherous. The warrior carried Taza for most of that distance, setting him down only when they needed to hide from occasional riders on the main trail. The boy burned with fever, but remained silent, conserving his meager strength. When they reached a small canyon with a spring-fed pool, the warrior finally stopped. He settled Taza in a sheltered alcove beneath overhanging rock and gathered wood for a small, nearly smokeless fire. "Water first," he told the boy, supporting Taza's head as he drank. From a cupped hand, the child gulped desperately, confirming the warrior's suspicion that the children had been poorly tended during transport. From Sarah's bundle, he took the willow bark and steeped it in hot water, adding a pinch of his own fever medicine from the pouch. The bitter brew would help, though Taza grimaced as he swallowed it. "Sleep now," the warrior said, covering the boy with his blanket. "Your body fights. Give it strength through rest." Taza's eyes, bright with fever, studied the warrior's face. "What do I call you?" he asked in halting Apache. The question landed like a stone in still water. The warrior hesitated before answering. "I have no name now." "Everyone has a name," Taza insisted weakly. "Not me, not anymore." The warrior turned away, busying himself with the fire. "Rest." While the boy slept, the warrior examined his worn leather map by firelight. It showed territories as they had been before the white settlements spread ancient paths through mountains, hidden water sources, caves where one could shelter unseen. Much would have changed, but the mountains themselves remained constant. Their situation was precarious. The warrior had no illusions about Colonel Webster's generosity. Once the unusual nature of their transaction became known to his superiors, the officer might well send men to reclaim the boy, and possibly arrest the warrior for interfering with government operations. They needed to reach Apache territory, but that presented its own dangers. As one who had surrendered his name, he would be shunned by his own people. And the boy was too weak for hard travel. Near midnight, Taza's fever spiked. He thrashed in delirium, crying out for his mother in mixed Spanish and Apache. The warrior bathed the child's face with cool water from the spring, murmuring soothing words, though he doubted Taza could hear them. "You will not die," he told the boy firmly, as if commanding it. "Not after what I gave for you." As he tended the child, memories of his own son's death surfaced unbidden. The same helplessness, the same desperate prayers. His wife had died first, then his son 3 days later, despite all his knowledge of healing plants and spiritual medicine. "I failed them," he whispered to the night. "I will not fail you." Near dawn, Taza's fever finally broke. The warrior, exhausted from his vigil, allowed himself a moment of relief before preparing for the day ahead. They needed to cover more ground before risking a longer rest out. As first light touched the canyon walls, he gently woke the boy. Taza's eyes were clearer now, his skin cooler to the touch. "Can you eat?" the warrior asked, offering a small piece of the bread Sarah had provided. Taza nodded, taking it with unsteady hands. After a few bites, he looked up. "Are we going to your people?" The warrior considered his answer carefully. "No, they would not welcome one without a name. Or they would take you, but cast me out. Where then?" The warrior pointed to a distant peak visible through the canyon opening. "There are places in those mountains where even Apaches seldom go. Sacred places. We will be safe there while you grow stronger. And then? And then we will decide our path, together." Taza seemed satisfied with this answer. As they prepared to leave their temporary shelter, the boy stood on his own, wobbling but determined. "I can walk today," he declared. The warrior nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "For a time. Tell me when you tire." 5 days into their journey, the warrior observed Taza studying a set of deer tracks with intense concentration. The boy's health had improved remarkably, whether from the medicine, clean water, or simply being free from captivity. His eyes were clear now, his movements more assured, though still hampered by lingering weakness. "What do you see?" The warrior asked, pausing beside him. Taza frowned. "Animal tracks. But I don't know what kind." The warrior knelt, pointing to the distinctive heart-shaped impressions. "Deer, female. She passed here this morning, while the ground was still damp from dew." He indicated subtle details, depth, clarity, direction, teaching the boy to read. The story written in soil. "My father never taught me these things," Taza said quietly. "He was a medicine man?" Taza nodded. "He knew plants and spirits, not hunting." A shadow passed over his face. "The soldiers came during a healing ceremony. Said we were practicing witchcraft against white settlers." The warrior absorbed this information silently. It explained much why Taza knew of bear visions, but not basic tracking. Why he recognized medicinal herbs, but couldn't identify game trails. "Your father's knowledge is important," the warrior said carefully. "But out here, you need different skills, too." He reached for a fallen branch of appropriate size and weight. "We will make you a bow. Small for learning." That afternoon, he showed Taza how to shape the wood, using his knife to demonstrate proper technique before allowing the boy to try. Together they worked, the warrior's weathered hands occasionally guiding Taza's smaller ones. "You must feel the wood's spirit," he explained. "Each branch has its own strength, its own voice." By evening, they had a serviceable small bow. The warrior unraveled threads from his own worn shirt to create a bowstring, twisting them together with methodical patience. "Tomorrow we hunt," he promised. That night by their small fire, Taza asked about the warrior's past. "Were you a great hunter for your people?" The warrior stared into the flames. "I hunted. I fought when needed. But my true gift was knowing sacred, places, finding paths others had forgotten." "Is that why you know where to go now?" The warrior nodded. "Even as a boy, I could feel where the ancestors had walked. It was this gift that sent me to the Bear Mountain for my vision quest." He paused, remembering he no longer had right to claim that history. "That was before you had no name," Taza finished. "Yes." Taza was silent for a long moment. "I will call you teacher," he finally declared. "That needs no vision or ceremony. It is what you are to me." The warrior felt something tight in his chest ease slightly. Not a name in the sacred sense, but an acknowledgement of purpose. He accepted it with a nod. Later, as Taza slept, the warrior kept watch, alert to night sounds around them. Twice he had spotted dust clouds in the distance riders, following the general direction they had taken. Whether Webster's men or random travelers, he couldn't be certain, but caution was necessary. They were approaching the border of traditional Apache territory. Soon they would need to decide whether to risk contact with others of their people. The boy needed community, other children, women to provide guidance the warrior could not offer. Yet the thought of being shunned, of being looked through as if invisible, of Taza seeing him treated as ghost walking, this troubled him more than he had anticipated. At dawn, as promised, they went hunting with a new bow. Taza's first attempts sent arrows flying wild, but he showed natural aptitude, adjusting his stance after each failure. "I hit nothing," Taza said with frustration after his 10th miss. "Today you learn to shoot," the warrior replied patiently. "Tomorrow, perhaps you hit something. The next day, perhaps we eat what you hit. Learning has its own time." Taza considered this, then nodded and raised the bow again. His small face set with determination. The trading post appeared as a smudge of smoke against the horizon, a single adobe structure with a corral for horses and mules. The warrior approached cautiously, circling twice to observe from different vantages before deciding to enter. "Wait here," he instructed Taza, concealing the boy in a stand of juniper trees overlooking the post. "Watch for riders. If trouble comes, head toward those twin peaks and make no sound." Taza nodded solemnly, clutching the small bow they had crafted. The warrior had intentionally kept the boy's hair long in the Apache way, but had dressed him in a mixture of native and settler clothing, enough to create confusion about his heritage if seen from a distance. The trading post's interior was dim after the bright sunlight. A heavy-set white man with a tobacco-stained beard looked up from behind a rough-hewn counter, his hand drifting meaningfully towards something beneath it. "We don't serve your kind here," he said flatly. "Government supplies go through the agency." The warrior stood his ground silently, scanning the room. Two trappers conversed quietly in one corner. A freight driver dozed on a bench. Near the back, a man in a colorful serape sorted through goods Mexican by his appearance. "I have items to trade," the warrior said simply. The owner spat into a brass cuspidor. "Unless it's gold or silver, I ain't interested. I'll deal with him, McCready," the Mexican trader intervened, stepping forward. "No need to lose business." His accent was thick, but his English clear. He nodded respectfully to the warrior. "Miguel Ortiz. I trade with all people who trade fairly." The warrior acknowledged him with a nod and reached into his pouch, producing several small carving stone animals made during quieter moments on their journey. The craftsmanship was exceptional, each capturing the essence of the creature. It represented folk art, Ortiz said approvingly, examining a bare figure. The tourists in Santa Fe pay good money for authentic Indian crafts. They negotiated quietly, the warrior exchanging his artwork for practical supplies: jerky, cornmeal, coffee, and most importantly, information. "Soldiers?" he asked as Ortiz wrapped the goods. The trader glanced toward McCready, then lowered his voice. "2 days ago, asking about an Indian with a boy." He slid a folded paper across the counter. "They left this." The warrior carefully unfolded the paper. Though he couldn't read the English words, the crude drawing was clear enough. A likeness of himself and Taza, with printed text below. $25 for information, Ortiz translated. $50 for return of the boy to military authorities. He studied the warrior's face. "They claim you stole him." "I paid for him," the warrior replied evenly. Ortiz raised an eyebrow, but asked no further questions. Instead, he slipped a small silver dollar into the warrior's palm with the "supplies. For luck," he murmured. "The mountain trails are dangerous these days. Bandits watch the main paths." The warning was clear. The warrior inclined his head in thanks and turned to leave. At that moment, the door swung open. 2 men entered, hard-faced, trail-worn, weapons prominently displayed. Bounty hunters. The warrior kept his head down, moving toward the exit as they approached the counter. "McCready?" the taller one called. "We need supplies." "Any word on that Apache and the boy we're tracking?" The trader's eyes flicked briefly to the warrior, then back. "Might have passed through yesterday. Headed north." "I reckon." The warrior reached the door, maintaining an unhurried pace that wouldn't draw attention. As he stepped outside, he heard one bounty hunter remark, "That Indian, just some Navajo," McCready interrupted. "Comes through regular, not your Apache." Outside, the warrior moved swiftly, but naturally toward the junipers where Taza waited. His senses alert for pursuit, he reached the boy and signaled for silence. Together, they retreated into the rocks, circling back to observe the trading post from a hidden vantage. Within 20 minutes, the bounty hunters emerged, mounted their horses, and rode northward away from their actual trail. "They're looking for us?" Taza whispered. The warrior nodded, showing him the wanted paper. "They offer money for your return." Taza's eyes widened in fear. "Will you?" "No." The warrior crumpled the paper and tucked it into his pouch. But now we must be more careful. No fires, no open trails. Dark clouds gathered on the western horizon, transforming afternoon into premature twilight. The warrior studied the approaching storm with concern. They were traversing exposed high ground with little natural shelter, and the heavy scent of rain carried on the strengthening wind promised no gentle shower. "We must find cover," he told Taza, pointing to a ridgeline ahead. "There are caves in those rocks." They quickened their pace as the first fat raindrops began to fall, pelting the dusty ground. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Taza flinched at the sound. "The thunder beings speak," the warrior explained, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "They cleanse the world with their voice." By the time they reached the ridge, rain fell in blinding sheets. The warrior's practiced eye located a dark opening in the cliff face, and they scrambled toward it as lightning split the sky directly overhead. The thunderclap that followed was immediate and deafening, shaking loose stones from the ridge. Cave entrance was narrow, but opened into a deeper chamber. As they squeezed inside, the warrior pulled a preserved ember wrap from his pouch. A coal, kept carefully alive in dried moss and bark, and coaxed it into flame. Illuminating their shelter dot, the flickering light revealed ancient paintings covering. The walls, handprints, animals, spirit figures dancing across stone. Taza's eyes widened, taking in the faded ochre images. "The ancestors sheltered here," the warrior said quietly. "Perhaps hundreds of summers ago." He produced an old buffalo hide from his pack, a prized possession he traded for months earlier, and spread it on the cave floor. The tanned skin would insulate them from the cold stone and provide crucial warmth through the storm god outside. The downpour intensified. Water began streaming past the cave entrance, transforming the dry wash below into a churning creek within minutes. "Will the bounty hunters follow us in this?" Taza asked, watching water cascade down the cliff face. "No, this rain washes away our trail. The storm is our ally." Taza huddled closer to the small fire, still eyeing the pictographs with fascination. "What do they mean?" The warrior studied the images. "They tell stories, hunts, visions, battles." He pointed to a series of connected spirals. "This speaks of a journey between worlds, like your bear vision." The warrior hesitated. He had surrendered the right to claim that story as his own, yet denying it felt equally false. "Similar," he acknowledged finally. "The ancestors understood there are times when we must travel between what is seen and unseen." A tremendous thunderclap shook the cave, making Taza jump and press against the warrior's side. "The thunder beings are angry," the boy whispered. "Not angry, powerful." The warrior's voice remained steady. "When I was a boy younger than you, storms frightened me too. My father taught me to count between lightning and thunder to know its distance." Taza looked up. "Your father?" "Yes, he was a hunter, like his father before him." A memory surfaced of sitting in a similar cave during a storm, his father's strong arm around his shoulders. "He told me that thunder is the voice of grandfather. Spirits reminding us they watch over the people. Even now? Even when the white soldiers come?" The warrior considered his answer carefully. "The spirits remain. It is we who sometimes forget to listen." As the storm continued its assault on the land, they ate a small meal of jerky and cornmeal cakes. The warrior used the opportunity to continue Taza's education, explaining how the rain would bring new growth, how animals would behave in its aftermath, where to find fresh water when the storm cleared. The boy listened intently, occasionally, asking questions that revealed an increasingly strategic mind. He was learning to think beyond immediate needs to future possibilities, a necessary skill for survival. Later, as Taza drifted to sleep wrapped in the buffalo hide, the warrior maintained his vigil. The storm had pinned them in place, but it had also granted valuable time to rest and recover strength. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges: flooded trails, muddy terrain, but also renewal. He studied the boy's face in the dying firelight. Something was changing between them, evolving beyond the transaction at the auction block. He felt it in his chest, an unexpected warmth where grief had long resided. The storm's aftermath transformed the landscape. Muddy trails meandered where dust had been, streams overflowed their banks, and wildflowers already pushed eager shoots through softened earth. Life responding immediately to water's blessing. By midday, they crested a small rise and spotted a thin column of smoke rising. From a valley below, a homestead nestled against the protective curve of a hillside. A single cabin, a modest corral with 2 horses, newly tilled earth in neat rows. The warrior studied it cautiously. Settler homesteads meant danger, but also potentially needed supplies. Their provisions wouldn't last another week. We go around? Taza asked, having quickly learned to be wary of white settlements. Before the warrior could answer, a high-pitched scream carried from the cabin, a child's voice in distress. The warrior tensed, scanning for threats, but saw only a bearded man, pacing anxiously outside the cabin door. "Wait here," he instructed Taza, secreting the boy in a dense thicket with a clear escape route. "If I do not return by sundown, follow the creek north to the Twin Peaks." The warrior approached openly, hands visible, stopping at a respectful distance. The settler whirled at his footsteps, face contorting with surprise and suspicion. He reached for the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. "That's far enough, Indian," the man warned, voice tight with stress rather than true hostility. The warrior stopped, noting the man's bloodshot eyes and exhausted posture. From inside the cabin came another cry, followed by a woman's soothing murmurs. "Your child is sick," the warrior stated simply. The settler's grip on his rifle faltered slightly. "My daughter, 3 days now with fever." Desperation overrode caution. "You know something about that?" The warrior nodded. "I have medicine knowledge." Indecision played across the settler's weathered-faced distrust of Indians, warring with the father's desperation. Another painful cry from within the cabin decided him. "Sarah," he called, keeping his eyes on the warrior. "There's an Indian here. Says he knows medicine." A woman appeared in the doorway, hair escaping a hasty bun, apron stained. She cradled a small girl of perhaps 5, whose flushed face and labored breathing spoke of serious illness. "James, we've tried everything," she said quietly. "What more have we to lose?" The man stepped aside reluctantly. "Any harm comes to them, I'll shoot you where you stand." The warrior entered the simple cabin. A wooden cross hung above the small hearth, the settler's medicine symbol. The woman laid the child on a rough-hewn bed in the corner, her movements gentle despite obvious exhaustion. The girl's symptoms were familiar, the same fever that had afflicted Taza, though more advanced. The warrior examined her carefully, noting the rash spreading across her chest. "I need my medicines," he said, "and a helper." He looked at the settler. "I have a boy with me. In the trees above. He has survived this sickness." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Sarah, go with him." The woman followed the warrior outside. When Taza emerged cautiously from hiding, her eyes widened in surprise. "An Apache child," she murmured. "My son," the warrior said simply, the claim emerging without conscious thought. Back inside, the warrior prepared a complex mixture from his remaining medicines: willow bark for fever, specific roots for the rash, herbs to ease breathing. He instructed Taza to help, demonstrating proper preparations while the settlers watched with tense hope. As night fell, they maintained vigil together, 2 cultures united by concern for a suffering child. The warrior showed the settlers how to apply cool cloths properly, when to administer the medicine, how to position the girl for easier breathing. Near midnight, the child's fever finally broke. The settler woman wept silently in relief, while her husband stood awkwardly before the warrior. "We've food to share," he offered gruffly, "and a dry barn for sleeping." Later, as they ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread, the barriers between them temporarily lowered by shared purpose, the settler asked, "You're far from reservation land. Running from something?" "Traveling to something," the warrior corrected. The man nodded, seeming to understand the distinction. He glanced at the sleeping Taza, curled near the hearth. "Boy's lucky to have a father willing to brave this country." The warrior didn't correct him. Something in the simple assumption felt right. Like a path appearing through fog dot, they departed the settler's homestead at dawn with fresh provisions and on. Crucial information. A military patrol had passed through 3 days earlier. The settler had told them, asking pointed questions about a renegade Apache with a stolen boy. The officer in charge, a Colonel Webster, had seemed unusually determined. "Not just following orders, that one," the settler had remarked. "Got something personal in it?" Now, climbing steadily into higher country, the warriors scanned their back trail with practiced eyes. A glint of light caught his attention, sunlight reflecting off glass or metal on a distant ridge. He quickly pulled Taza into the shelter of a rock outcropping. "What is it?" the boy whispered. "Watchers." The warrior pointed to the faint gleam. "Military telescope." They remained motionless until the glint disappeared, then changed direction, cutting across a scree slope that would leave minimal tracks. The warrior had been teaching Taza evasion techniques, walking on stone, crossing streams to break their trail, using branches to sweep away footprints in softer ground. "Why does the blue-coat soldier want me back so badly?" Taza asked as they navigated a precarious ledge. The warrior considered the question. "I believed it was wounded pride at first, but now I think there is more." That evening, they made camp in a defensive position, a small cave with clear views of the approaches, multiple escape routes, and a concealed fire pit that dispersed smoke through crevices in the rock. As they ate the settler woman's cornbread, the warrior continued Taza's training, now focusing on night movement. "Darkness is your ally," he explained. "Learn to trust your feet to find the path when eyes cannot." Taza practiced walking silently across their small camp, his movements growing more confident with each attempt. The boy was changing, not just recovering physically, but developing the alertness and skills of a true Apache youth. Pride warmed the warrior's chest as he watched. Before sleep, they carefully reviewed their planned route on the worn leather map. The warrior pointed to a high mountain pass ahead. "This is dangerous ground," he said. "But if we cross it, we reach the valley beyond, where other Apaches sometimes camp during summer moons." "Will they welcome us?" Taza asked, anxiety edging. His voice, the warrior, couldn't lie. "They will welcome you. For me, ... He left the sentence unfinished. In the night, Taza cried out from a nightmare. The warrior woke him gently, offering water and quiet reassurance. "I dreamed of the auction," the boy whispered. "But this time, no one came for me." The warrior placed a hand on Taza's shoulder. "I will always come for you." The simple promise seemed to settle the boy, who soon drifted back to sleep. The warrior remained awake, troubled by the intensity of the pursuit. Something about Webster's determination felt personal, obsessive. There was more to this than the recovery of an auctioned child at first light. They resumed their journey. The warrior deliberately set a complex trail doubling back, creating false leads, even removing their moccasins to walk barefoot over rocky ground, leaving less distinctive prints. Near midday, they paused at a vantage point overlooking the valley they'd traversed. The warrior's sharp eyes picked out multiple groups of riders converging on their previous campsite, moving with the precision of military units rather than random bounty hunters. "They track like wolves," he murmured. "Can they find us?" Taza asked, fear evident despite his efforts to appear brave. "They have many men. We have knowledge." The warrior studied the terrain ahead. "And now we have this." He removed something from his pouch, a small brass telescope, traded from the settler in exchange for medicine knowledge. With it, he scanned the distant units, confirming his suspicions. When he spotted a familiar figure directing operations, Colonel Webster himself had joined the pursuit, abandoning the comfort of his post for the rigors of the home. Trail unusual dedication for a military officer concerned with mere protocol. We must understand why he hunts so desperately, the warrior sighed, collapsing the telescope. Knowledge of the hunter's mind is as important as speed or strength. Taza nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson. Like knowing why the mountain lion tracks the deer. Yes, exactly so. The warrior ruffled the boy's hair, a gesture of approval that came naturally now. And today, we become to win something no man can track. The mountain pass narrowed to a treacherous ribbon of stone, forcing them to proceed single file, along a cliff edge. Far below, pine trees appeared as small as sage brush. The thin air at this altitude made breathing labored, especially for Taza, though the boy pushed on without complaint. We rest here, the warrior decided, finding a sheltered ledge protected from both wind and distant observation. Taza sank down gratefully, his endurance impressive, but still limited by his age and recent illness. As they shared dried meat and piñon nuts. An eagle soared overhead, riding thermals with barely a wing beat. Taza watched, transfixed, as the great bird circled. Eagle teaches us to see the whole path, the warrior said, following the boy's gaze. Not just what lies before our feet. I wish I could fly, Taza sighed. We would be at the valley already. The warrior smiled. Walking the difficult path makes us stronger. Even eagles must first struggle from the egg. While they rested, the warrior noticed something caught in a crevice nearby, a single eagle feather, its shaft still strong, despite exposure to mountain weather. He retrieved it carefully, examining its markings before offering it to Taza. Eagle leaves us a gift, he said, a good sign for our journey. Taza accepted the feather reverently, running his fingers along its edge. My father said eagle feathers hold power. They do, when respected. The warrior showed him how to wrap the quill end with a small strip of leather from his pouch, creating a proper handle. This one came to you? Keep it close. They continued their ascent through the afternoon, the trail growing steeper. In places, the warrior had to lift Taza over particularly difficult stretches. By evening, they reached the pass summit, where ancient stones had been arranged in patterns meaningful to those who knew how to read them. A sacred place, the warrior explained, indicating the deliberate placement of rocks. Our ancestors marked this path many generations ago. From this vantage, they could see both where they had come from and where they were going, the valley beyond, green with spring growth, a ribbon of water gleaming in the setting sun. But the warrior's attention fixed on something closer, subtle signs of recent passage. Others have been here, he said, examining scuff marks on stone, a disturbed pattern in the ancient markers. Soldiers? Taza asked anxiously. The warrior shook his head. Apache. He pointed to a nearly invisible sign scratched into a roca, symbol for moving camp. Our people passed this way, recently. They made camp in a protected hollow just below the summit, using no fire despite the mountain chill. As stars emerged in the darkening sky, Taza huddled close to the warrior for warmth. Tell me about your son, the boy said suddenly. The one? Who died? The request startled the warrior. He had mentioned his loss only briefly, yet Taza had clearly been thinking about it. His name was Kayan too, the warrior said softly, the words feeling like stones lifted from a long-closed cave. It means swift hawk. He was 7 summers when the sickness came. Was he strong? Taza asked. Yes, and clever. He could track rabbit better than boys twice his age. The warrior's voice grew distant with memory. He laughed often. His mother said he was born smiling. You miss them. It wasn't a question, but the warrior answered anyway. Every day. Taza was quiet for a long moment. When my father died, the soldiers wouldn't let us mourn properly. They said our ceremonies were heathen practices. His small hand found the warriors in the darkness. I think our ancestors know when we remember them, even without the proper songs. The warrior's throat tightened at the simple wisdom in those words. I believe you are right. They fell silent, listening to the mountain wind's whispered secrets. After Taza drifted to sleep, the warrior remained awake, keeping watch, but also lost in thoughts of what lay ahead. Finding other Apache would mean safety for Taza, but uncertainty for himself. The boy needed his people, their traditions and knowledge, that one man alone, especially one without a name, could not provide. Yet the thought of separation created an unexpected hollow in his chest. In the short weeks of their journey, Taza had become more than a responsibility. The boy had somehow worked his way into spaces left empty by grief, bringing purpose where there had been only survival. Before sleep finally claimed him, the warrior glimpsed a shooting star crossing the sky, a sign that change was coming. Ready or not, they descended into the valley as afternoon shadows lengthened, following game trails through pine forest that gradually gave way to open meadows. The warrior moved with heightened caution, aware they were entering territory where Apache bands might establish seasonal camps. Near sunset, he detected wood smoke on the breeze, not the harsh smell of settler fires, but the sweeter scent of juniper and pine. He signaled Taza to remain still while he crept forward to investigate. From a concealed position, he observed a small encampment, 7 lodges arranged in the traditional half-circle. Women preparing evening meals, children playing a hoop game, men repairing weapons and tools. A typical spring gathering of extended families. The warrior studied them carefully. Not his own band, but he recognized their manner of dress and the particular style of their lodges. White Mountain Apache, cousins to his own people. Among them, he spotted an elder whose face triggered distant memory. Naish, a respected medicine man who had once visited his people for a ceremonial exchange many seasons ago. Returning to Taza, the warrior explained what he had found. These are our relatives, though not my direct people. The elder among them once knew me. Before. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Will they know what happened to your name? Taza asked anxiously. Word travels between bands. They may have heard. The warrior considered their options. Approaching meant safety and community for Taza, but potential shunning for himself. Yet they needed information, supplies, and possibly allies against Webster's pursuit. We will approach openly, he decided. You will speak for us. Taza's eyes widened. Me? But I don't know the proper words. You are Apache. The words are in your blood. The warrior straightened the boy's clothing and adjusted the eagle feather he now wore tied in his hair. You will say we come in peace, seeking shelter for the night. Nothing more until I signal. They approached the camp as the first evening. Stars appeared. The warrior walked slightly behind Taza, head unbowed, but hands empty and visible. Their arrival caused immediate reaction. Men moving protectively toward women and children, hands resting on weapons. Taz, a stepped forward as instructed, speaking in careful Apache. We come in peace, seeking shelter for the night. His young voice carried clearly across the suddenly silent camp. The elder, Naishi, emerged from the central lodge, leaning on a wooden staff adorned with sacred symbols. He studied them with keen eyes that missed nothing, despite his advanced age. A boy of our people, he observed, and ... His gaze sharpened as it fell upon the warrior. One I once knew by another name. Murmurs spread through the gathered Apache. The warrior met Naish's gaze steadily, but remained silent, allowing the elder to navigate the difficult spiritual territory they now entered. Bring them to the council fire, Nate decided after a long mint. The boy first, then. He hesitated, finding no appropriate word for one without a name. Then his companion. Inside the lodge, seated around a small fire, Nate offered food, a crucial gesture that acknowledged them as guests rather than intruders. While they ate, the elder asked Taza gentle questions about his family, his experiences, gradually, drawing out the boy's story of the raid, the auction, and his rescue. When Taza described how the warrior had surrendered his name in exchange for him, several of the Apache men exchanged troubled glances. To give up one's sacred name was almost unheard of, a violation of tradition. So profound it created spiritual discomfort among those who heard of it. Nate finally addressed the warrior directly. You were once called Bear Spirit. I remember. When you received this name, your vision was powerful. His weathered face revealed both respect and concern. To surrender such a name for a child not of your blood, this breaks ancient ways. The ancient ways did not foresee children sold like cattle. The warrior replied quietly. A tribal drum sounded from outside, the evening ceremony beginning. Nate's expression softened slightly as he looked at Taza. The boy should join the children's circle. He has been too long away from his people's songs. Taza glanced uncertainly at the warrior, who nodded encouragement. As the boy left with one of the younger men, Nate leaned closer to the warrior. Now, the elder said gravely, tell me of those who hunt you. Dawn broke with urgent movement through the Apache camp. The warrior emerged from the guest lodge where he and Taza had spent the night to find riders preparing to depart. Nate approached, his expression grave. Our scouts report soldiers in the canyon pass, the elder explained. 2 groups 1. Approaching from the south, another circling to cut off the northern escape. He handed the warrior a small leather pouch. Medicine for your journey. You must leave now. The warrior accepted the gift with respect. His conversation with Nate the previous night had revealed much, including that several other Apache children from the auction had been reclaimed by relatives who had tracked them to their new homes. This explained Webster's intensified pursuit. The colonel faced embarrassment and possibly discipline for losing his civilizing program subjects. They come for the boy specifically? Nate had asked. Yes, the colonel believes returning Taza would restore his honor. Now, watching the camp's swift transformation from settled routine to evacuation, the warrior felt the weight of bringing danger to these people. The band would scatter into smaller family groups, using traditional methods to disappear into the landscape, but they would have remained safely in their spring camp if not for his arrival. Taza joined him, carrying a small bundle of gifts from the other children, the sling for hunting small game, a carved wooden animal, a braided cord for his eagle feather. We cannot go with him? The boy asked, watching families preparing to depart in different directions. Our trail brings soldiers, the warrior explained gently. We must draw this danger away from the people. Nate's grandson, a young warrior named Key, approached leading 2 horses, a rare and precious resource among Apache who traditionally traveled on foot. The elder says you will need speed, Key explained, handing over the reins. These are from his personal herd. The warrior's eyes widened at the extraordinary gift. We cannot. He says what you gave for the boy was greater. Key glanced at Taza. And he says the spirits have shown him you will need them before the sun sets. Within minutes, they were riding southwest away from both the scattering Apache band and the reported soldier positions. The warrior chose a route through a narrow canyon that would be difficult for larger military groups to navigate efficiently. By midday, they reached a critical juncture where the canyon forked. The obvious path led west toward open country and, eventually, Mexican territory. The less visible route twisted north through treacherous terrain that seemed impassable on horseback. They will expect us to take the western path, the warrior reasoned aloud, studying both options. It appears easier, safer. Taza, growing more confident in strategic thinking, nodded. So we go north. The warrior smiled his approval. We go north. The northern passage narrowed dramatically, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through tight passages where the canyon walls nearly touched. Progress was painfully slow, but the warrior's experienced eye noted the path remained viable. Just barely. They had navigated perhaps half a mile when the sound reached them of a cavalry bugle echoing through the canyon behind them. The soldiers had discovered their trail more quickly than anticipated. They have Apache scouts, the warrior realized grimly. Good ones. Urging Taza ahead, they pushed through increasingly difficult terrain. The horses, mountain-bred and sure-footed, managed the treacherous footing, but their pace remained dangerously slow. The canyon walls suddenly opened to a broader passage, and the warrior froze at the sight before them. Ahead, perfectly positioned to intercept anyone emerging from the hide, narrow section, waited a detachment of soldiers, rifles ready. The trap had been perfectly executed. Colonel Webster himself sat mounted at the center of the line, telescope in hand. He had anticipated their strategy, placing men at both canyon exits. There! A soldier spotted them, raising his rifle. The warrior pulled Taza behind a boulder. As a shot cracked against stone nearby, the horses shied nervously, but held their ground, trained not to bolt at gunfire. No shooting, Webster's voice carried clearly. I want the boy unharmed. The warrior scanned their surroundings with desperate intensity. The main canyon offered no cover for a rush forward or retreat. The walls rose sheer on both sides, seemingly unclimbable. Then he saw it, a narrow crevice in the eastern wall, partially hidden by shadow. Not a proper trail, barely a game path, but possibly their only chance. When I move, follow exactly, he whispered to Taza. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. The boy nodded, eyes wide but trusting, taking a deep breath. The warrior made his decision. The warrior slapped the horses' flanks, sending them bolting toward the soldiers. A momentary distraction, they pulled all eyes away from their true escape. Root, in the chaos, he pulled Taza into the shadow-hidden crevice, a gap barely wide enough for a man to pass sideways. They're in the rocks. Someone shouted, but by then they were squeezing through the narrow passage, the warrior leading, Taza following precisely in his footsteps. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets striking stone, sending fragments flying. The passage twisted sharply upward, becoming a chimney of sorts that required careful climbing. The warrior lifted Taza ahead of him at the most difficult sections, the boy scrambling with newfound agility despite the danger. Can they follow? You? Taza gasped as they paused on a small ledge. Not easily, the warrior replied, studying the route below. The horses created confusion. And this path? He glanced up at the narrow crack continuing above them. This is not a path soldiers would see. They climbed throughout the afternoon, the sounds of pursuit fading and resuming as the military forces regrouped and sent men on foot to follow. The crevice eventually opened onto a high plateau, windswept and exposed. The warrior assessed their situation grimly. They had escaped the immediate trap, but lost the horses, most of their supplies, and now faced open terrain with determined pursuers behind them. Worse, his side burned where a bullet fragment had grazed him during their ascent. Not serious yet, but beginning to sap his strength. There, he decided, pointing to a distinctive formation of red rocks in the distance. We go there before. Dark. They crossed the plateau at a steady jog, the warrior pushing them despite his injury. Taza matched his pace without complaint, the weeks of travel having built the once sickly boy's endurance. As sunset painted the landscape in fire colors, they reached the red rock formation, a circle of ancient stones surrounding a flat altar-like slab covered in petroglyphs. The warrior recognized the place instantly, though he had never physically been there. I know this place, he murmured, touching the stones reverently. From before? Taza asked. From visions. The warrior traced the spiraling petroglyphs with a gentle finger. This is Talking Stone Place, a sacred site where ancestors communed with spirit guides. They found shelter in a shallow cave beneath the stone circle, hidden from casual observation. The warrior finally allowed himself to examine his wound, a shallow but long gash across his ribs that had bled enough to weaken him. Taza, showing surprising competence, helped clean it using medicine from Nature's pouch. You need rest, the boy insisted, sounding suddenly older than his years. The warrior couldn't argue. Fever had begun to rise as night fell, his body fighting the wound's anger. He drank the medicine Taza prepared, then settled against the cool cave wall, instructing the boy on keeping watch. If soldiers come, wake me immediately. If I cannot wake... He hesitated, then continued practically. If I cannot wake, follow the North Star until you reach the mountains we crossed. Nature's people will find you. You will wake, Taza said firmly, arranging his small body next to the warrior's. Sharing warmth. Fever dreams came swiftly. Warrior found himself standing in the stone circle, under brilliant stars, but he was not alone. Shadowy figures surrounded him, Apache ancestors in ceremonial dress, their faces stern, yet not unkind. You walk between worlds, one said, voice like wind through dry grass. I walk nowhere, the warrior replied. I have no name, no place. Names are given and taken away, said another figure, stepping forward, a medicine man wearing bare claws. As a necklace, but spirit remains. The warrior recognized him with shock. Father? The medicine man neither confirmed nor denied, continuing, You surrendered what was precious to save what was precious. This is the old way beneath the new way. The circle of ancestors began a slow dance around him, chanting in ancient Apache that even the warrior could barely understand. As they moved, he noticed a small figure watching from beyond the circle, his son, Keontu, neither approaching nor retreating, simply witnessing. The boy you protect carries future songs, the bear medicine man said. Your name was one price. There may be others. I would pay them, the warrior answered without hesitation. The ancestors nodded, as if this was the answer they expected. The bear medicine man approached, pressing something invisible, but heavy into the warrior's hands. Identity lives in actions, not in words spoken by others. Remember this when you stand before those who judge by smaller laws. The vision began to fade, the figures becoming transparent as dawn light filtered into the stone circle. The last thing the warrior saw was Keontu raising his hand in farewell, his face peaceful rather than sad. The warrior woke to Taza's urgent whisper. Soldiers, coming up the eastern path. Sunlight indicated mid-morning. He had slept longer than intended. His fever had broken, leaving him weak but clear-headed. The wound still burned, but no longer pulsed with infection's heat. Through the cave entrance, he could see dust rising from a trail below. Not just one group, but several, converging on the sacred site from different directions. Webster had deployed, his men in a comprehensive sweep, determined to leave no escape route uncovered. The warrior assessed their situation with brutal honesty. They were cornered, his strength compromised, their supplies nearly gone. Continuing to run would likely mean death for both of them in this harsh terrain. What will we do? Taza asked, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. The warrior remembered his vision. Identity lives in actions. The ancestors had shown him something important, something beyond mere survival. We will stop running, he decided. Taz looked startled. Give up? No, face them on our terms. The warrior retrieved his medicine pouch. There is power in this place. We will use it. He instructed Taza to gather specific stones from the circle above ones, marked with certain symbols. While the boy did this, the warrior tore a strip from his shirt, fastening it to a branch to create a crude white flag. When Taza returned, the warrior arranged the sacred stones in a pattern before the cave entrance, then explained his plan. The boy listened intently, asking clarifying questions that revealed his growing strategic mind. "It is dangerous," the warrior acknowledged when he finished. "But running has become more dangerous." Taza nodded solemnly. "I trust you, father." The word hung between them, unexpected, yet somehow perfectly natural. The warrior placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. Unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his throat, they emerged from hiding as the first. Soldiers reached the plateau's edge. The warrior stood tall despite his injury, white flag held high, positioned deliberately within the stone circle. Taza remained in the cave entrance as instructed, visible but protected. "Colonel Webster," the warrior called, his voice carrying across the open ground. "I would speak with you before more blood is shed in this sacred place." Movement ceased among the soldiers. After a brief consultation, Webster rode forward, flanked by 2 lieutenants. He reined his horse to a stop at a respectful distance, studying the scene before him with evident surprise. "I admit I did not expect parley," Webster said. "You've led us on quite a chase." "A chase that ends here," the warrior replied, "but not as you imagine." Webster's expression hardened. "There's only one acceptable ending. The boy returns to government custody for proper placement. You face charges for interference with official operations. You pursue one boy with unusual determination, Colonel." "Why?" The question seemed to catch Webster off guard. "It's a matter of principle. Law and order must be maintained. 6 other children from the auction have been reclaimed by Apache relatives," the warrior countered. "Yet you commit so many men to finding just this one." Webster's jaw tightened. "Those circumstances were different." "Because those children were taken by blood relatives? And I am not?" The warrior gestured to Taza. "What makes this boy so important to you personally?" A lieutenant leaned toward Webster, whispering something, but the colonel waved him off impatiently. "My motivations are not the issue," Webster insisted. "The law is clear. The boy is a ward of the government. The law that takes children from their people and sells them to strangers?" The warrior's voice remained calm, but carried moral authority. "Such law deserves no respect." Webster's face flushed. "Your primitive understanding, Colonel Webster." The new voice came from behind the military line. Soldiers parted as a wagon approached, driven by a familiar figure, Sarah Holloway, the teacher from the auction. She was not alone. Beside her sat an older man in formal attire, clutching a leather portfolio. "Miss Holloway, this is no place for civilians," Webster began, but she cut him off with uncharacteristic sharpness. "Mr. Abernathy is from the Indian Affairs Commission," she announced. "He brings documents regarding the legality of your redistribution program." The commissioner climbed down from the wagon with dignity despite the difficult terrain. "Colonel, I've reviewed the records Miss Holloway has collected. There was no proper authorization for removing these children from their tribal communities. No documentation of orphan status. No judicial review." He opened his portfolio, removing official-looking papers. "I have here a directive suspending all such auctions pending full investigation." Webster's expression shifted from annoyance to concern. "Those documents would need to be verified. They're authenticated, Colonel." Abernathy replied firmly. "Your authorization is revoked, effective immediately." The warrior watched this exchange with cautious hope, maintaining his position within the stone circle. The ancestors had led them here, to this moment, to this confrontation that now unfolded. In unexpected ways, Colonel Webster's composure cracked as the implications of Abernathy's presence sank in. His carefully constructed program and potentially his career hung in the balance. "The boy's situation is unique," Webster insisted, a new desperation edging his voice. His father was a medicine man who actively undermined government authority, teaching resistance rather than adaptation. The warrior suddenly understood Webster's fixation. You knew Taz's father. I dealt with him, Webster admitted stiffly. He was influential among the Apache, using superstition to prevent progress. The boy was to be my demonstration that even the child of such a man could be properly civilized. A personal project, then, Abernathy noted, his tone sharpening. Not official policy. Sarah stepped forward. I've documented everything, Colonel. The conditions of the children's captivity, the arbitrary separation of families, the lack of proper care for the sick. She gestured toward Taza. This boy was dying of fever when this man saved him, a fever contracted while in government custody. Webster's? Lieutenants exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the tide turning against their commander. The warrior remained within the stone circle, drawing strength from the sacred ground. I offer a resolution, he proposed. Recognize my claim to the boy, made in accordance with Apache tradition and witnessed by your own people. In return, we seek no retribution for what has been done. Abernathy considered this. The Commission is primarily concerned with legal procedure and humane treatment. If the boy has a guardian who can provide proper care. He looked questioningly at the warrior. I can and will, the warrior affirmed. Webster made a last attempt. This man has no legal standing, no recognized position in white or Indian society. He's not even registered with an agency. Yet he gave everything he had for the boy, Sarah countered. What better qualification for guardianship could exist? The commissioner turned to Taza, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Young man, what is your wish in this matter? Taza straightened, speaking with clear conviction despite his youth. I wish to remain with my father. The simple declaration hung in the air, powerful in its certainty. Abernathy nodded. Then I see no reason to separate them, particularly given the irregular circumstances of the boy's removal from his people. He turned to Webster. Colonel, consider this matter resolved. The Commission will expect your full cooperation with the broader investigation. Webster's face tightened with suppressed anger, but military discipline held. With a curt nod, he issued orders for his men to withdraw. As the soldiers departed, Sarah approached the stone circle. I've been gathering testimonies from other families, she explained. When I learned of Webster's obsession with finding you specifically, I contacted the Commission. She smiled at Taza. I'm glad to see you well. The warrior expressed his gratitude, then asked, What happens now? The program is suspended, Abernathy explained. Children not yet reunited with relatives will be returned to their tribal communities, where possible. He studied the warrior thoughtfully. And you? Where will you go? Home, the warrior decided. It is time Taza knew his people properly. 2 weeks later, they approached the summer camp of the warrior's original tribe. Word had traveled ahead of them. Nate had seen to that, and a delegation waited at the edge of the encampment. Among them stood the tribal council leader, holding the ceremonial talking stick. The warrior stopped at a respectful distance. By tradition, one without a name could not enter the camp without special dispensation. Taza sensed the tension and stood tall beside him, a reassuring presence. The council leader approached slowly. We have heard a strange tale, he began formally, of a man who surrendered his sacred name for a child not his own, of soldiers who hunted them through the mountains, of ancestors who spoke at the talking stone place. He paused, studying the warrior's face. We must decide if such actions honor or dishonor our ways. The warrior bowed his head in acceptance of the process. Whatever came next, he had followed, the path shown to him by vision and conscience. The council will hear you both, the leader continued, surprising him by including Taza. The boy who was rescued, the man who once had a name among us. He extended the talking stick. Come, we are listening. As they followed the leader into the camp, the warrior felt Taza's small hand slip into his own. Whatever judgment awaited, they would face it together, father and son by choice rather than blood, perhaps the strongest bond of all Dot. The council's deliberation lasted 3 days. The warrior and Taza remained in a guest lodge at the camp's edge, neither fully accepted nor rejected a liminal state that mirrored their journey together. Tribal members visited cautiously, bringing food and necessities, but maintaining traditional distance from one without a name. Yet curiosity about their story drew people regardless, especially the children, who were fascinated by Taza's tales of their escape from soldiers. On the evening of the 3rd day, a messenger arrived. The council has reached decision. You are summoned at dawn. That night, unable to sleep, the warrior sat outside beneath stars that seemed to hold their breath in anticipation. Taza joined him, wrapped in a blanket against the desert chill. Are you afraid? The boy asked. The warrior considered this. Not of judgment, he answered honestly, but of failing you. You have never failed me, Taza said with the simple certainty. Of youth. Dawn arrived with ceremonial drums. The entire tribe gathered in a circle around the central fire, where the council elders sat in their formal positions. The warrior and Taza were led to stand at the circle's center, the eldest council. Member, a woman whose face mapped a century of tribal history, spoke first. We have considered this matter from many directions. What was done breaks with tradition. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Yet traditions themselves began as new paths once. She gestured to an elderly man who unrolled. Hide painting depicting ancient tribal stories. Our ancestors tell of a time when a warrior gave up his name to save his people from drought. He walked nameless until the rains returned, then received a new name from the water itself. A second elder stepped forward. And there is the tale of 2 mothers, where a woman surrendered her status to raise another's child when both faced starvation. The council leader raised the talking stick. We find that what was done, though unprecedented in living memory, follows the deeper pattern of our oldest values, sacrifice for the most vulnerable among us. Hope flickered in the warrior's chest as the leader continued. The boy Taza has spoken to us of your journey, of your teaching, of your protection. The spirits at Talking Stone Place have sent signs through Nature, confirming their approval. The leader paused, looking directly at the warrior. We cannot return what was surrendered. Your former name remains beyond reach. The warrior nodded, in acceptance. But the council finds wisdom in creating a new path. The leader gestured, and several women brought forward an eagle-bone whistle, decorated with beads and feathers, an instrument used only in naming ceremonies. Ancient stories tell us that in extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary measures are permitted. The tribe's medicine man stepped into the circle, taking the whistle and raising it skyward. You came to us as one without name, but you will not remain so. He began a sacred song, the high notes of the whistle calling to the 4 directions. When the song concluded, the medicine man faced the warrior. From this day forward, you shall be known among all Apache as Bilagana Bichis Yashti, guardian of children. This name recognizes your sacrifice and establishes your new purpose among us. The warrior, now guardian of children, felt something settle into place within him, a weight lifting even as a new responsibility took its place. The council leader turned to Taza. And you, son of a medicine man, rescued from those who would erase your heritage, are formally accepted as this man's son by tribal law and spiritual recognition. A cheer rose from the gathered Apache, the formality of the ceremony giving way to celebration. Women brought forward new clothing for both of them, garments that marked their recognized status in the tribe. That evening, as festivities continued around them, Guardian of Children sat with his son beside the fire. Other children had drawn Taza into their games, but he returned periodically to his father's side, as if reassuring himself that their new stability was real. Is it strange? Taza asked. Having a different name? Not different, guardian of. Children corrected gently. New, like the spring grass after winter snow. Taza considered this, then nodded with the wisdom children sometimes possess. The old name was for who you were. This name is for who you became. Guardian of Children looked out at the tribe, his people, who had found a way to honor tradition, while embracing necessary change. In the distance, beyond the firelight, he thought he glimpsed for a moment the spirit of a bear, watching approvingly before melting back into darkness. Yes, he agreed, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. And it is a good name for the path ahead.